May 4th, 1945. The war is ending in a collapse of command and steel. In the Flensburg Fjord, the water is calm, but the endgame orders are moving through the fleet, issued, argued, and in places still obeyed even as surrender terms close in. The word is Regenbogen. In English, it means rainbow. It sounds innocent, but in the Kriegsmarine, it is a denial order. Action. Regenbogen, scuttle the boats before they can be taken. The recipient of this order is the U-2540. She is not an ordinary Wolfpack submarine. She is a Type 21. She is the most advanced underwater machine on the planet. She has never gone on a combat patrol. The war ends before her design ever gets a chance to hunt. She is factory fresh and lethal by design. But today, her mission is not to kill, but to die. The captain does not order a course change to the open Atlantic. He orders the crew to open the sea valves. This is the physics of self-destruction. A submarine exists in a delicate negotiation with Archimedes. To float it must displace a weight of water equal to its own mass. The U-2540 displaces 1,621 tons on the surface. To dive, it floods specific ballast tanks to become neutrally buoyant. It hovers. But scuttling is different. Scuttling is the deliberate removal of the reserve buoyancy that keeps the hull alive. The crew moves through the compartments. They are not fighting fire or flood. They are inviting it. They rotate the heavy iron wheels of the main flood valves. Usually these valves are controlled with absolute precision to trim the boat. Today they are spun fully open and left there. The sea rushes in. It is not the violent spray of a depth charge breach. It is a steady, relentless column of green Baltic water. Inside the pressure hull, the atmosphere changes. As the water rises, it compresses the air trapped in the upper spaces. The pressure builds. If they do not vent the air, the back pressure will eventually stop the water flow and the boat might wallow half sunk. So they open the vents, they scream the air out of the boat. The noise is a deafening hiss of escaping atmosphere. This is the death rattle of the machine. The buoyancy vanishes. The weight of the steel takes over. The U-2540 begins to settle. She does not plunge into the abyss. The Flensburg Fjord is shallow by submarine standards. Tens of meters, not the abyss. A depth that denies the boat a crush and preserves it as an object. This is a critical tactical detail. If she were sinking in the mid-Atlantic, the hull would eventually reach crush depth and implode. The ocean would squeeze the high tensile steel until it buckled and snapped. But here, the depth is survivable. The pressure at 100 feet is roughly 44 pounds per square inch. The hull is rated for many times that load. She hits the bottom, the impact is soft. The seabed here is not rock, it is a thick, chaotic layer of silt and mud. The keel slices into the sediment. The momentum drives the hull down until the mud rises up the sides of the saddle tanks. The massive batteries in the lower deck add weight to the anchor. She settles with a slight list. The water inside equalizes with the water outside. The violence stops. The hissing stops. The boat is now a static object. This scuttling is an act of denial. The logic is simple. If the German Navy cannot have this technology, the Allies must not have it either. The Type 21 is the first true submarine in history. Previous boats were surface ships that could dip underwater for short periods. This boat was designed to live submerged. It has streamlined hydrodynamics that allow it to move faster underwater than on the surface. It is a prize of incalculable engineering value. By sending it to the mud, the crew believes they are erasing its secrets. They are wrong. They have not destroyed the U-2540. They have merely placed it in cold storage. The cold, low oxygen water of the Baltic enters the compartments. It soaks the electrical panels. It ruins the optics of the periscope. But it treats the steel with surprising gentleness. The corrosion process begins, but it is slow. The mud seals the lower hull sections, protecting them from the flow of oxygenated water. For 12 years, the boat sits in the dark. The war ends, the world changes. Navies transition from diesel to nuclear power. But the design buried in the Flensburg mud remains relevant. The physics of silence and hydrodynamic efficiency do not age. The U-2540 becomes a ghost. She is a hazard on the charts, a snag for fishing nets, a memory of a fallen empire. Most scuttled warships remain where they fall until they dissolve into rust. They are considered war graves or navigation hazards to be blown apart with explosives. But this hull is different. The steel is a rare alloy. The design is a missing link in naval evolution. In the naval headquarters of the new West German government, engineers begin to look at the charts. They do not see a wreck. They see an opportunity. They see a hull that would cost millions to build from scratch lying free for the taking. The decision is made to violate the grave. The logic of war demanded she sink. The logic of the Cold War demands she rise. But the ocean has claimed her. The mud has gripped the hull with a suction force that rivals the weight of the ship itself. To bring her back, they will have to fight the seabed. They will have to reverse the irreversible step taken on that day in May. The silence of the fjord is about to be broken. By June 1957, the boat has been under for 12 years. The war stopped the clock. The sea did not. The hull is still there, still flooded, still locked into the mud. The surface world has rebuilt itself. The West German Navy needs a submarine fleet, but the politics of the post-war era suffocate their shipbuilding capacity. They cannot build a new heavy hull, they must resurrect a dead one. The salvage operation begins not with cranes, but with mathematics and divers. The depth is manageable. At 100 feet, the divers can work for reasonable intervals without the crushing decompression penalties of deep water operations. But the environment is hostile in a different way. The Baltic Sea is dark and turbid. Visibility is measured in inches. The divers descend into a gloom that swallows light. They are blind men feeling the bones of a leviathan. Their first enemy is not the weight of the steel. It is the seabed itself. The U-2540 is resting in a thick bed of clay and silt. Over 12 years, the hull has settled. It has become part of the geological strata. This creates a phenomenon known as mud suction. When a ship settles into soft mud, it displaces the water beneath it. The mud creates a perfect seal around the curvature of the hull. To lift the ship, you cannot simply overcome gravity. You must overcome the vacuum. As you pull up, the mud refuses to flow. No water can rush in to fill the void beneath the keel. This creates a low-pressure zone under the ship while the full weight of the water column pushes down from above. Engineers call it the breakout force. It is not a metaphor. In soft mud, it can make a hull feel twice as heavy before it moves at all. The U-2540 has a submerged displacement of 1,819 tons. But to the lifting cables, she might feel like 3,000 tons until that seal is broken. The divers must probe the mudline. They jet water tunnels under the hull to break the suction and allow the sea to equalize the pressure. It is slow, brutal work performed in total darkness. The divers also inspect the hull itself. They are looking for the scars of Operation Regenbogen. They check the valves, the vents, and the hatches. But they are also checking a unique structural feature. The Type 21 was not built like traditional ships, which were laid down keel first and built up rib by rib. This boat was mass-produced in 8 separate modular sections. These cylinders were welded together at the shipyard to form the final cigar shape. This modular construction was intended to speed up wartime production. Now it serves the forensic salvage team. The divers inspect the circumferential welds where the sections join. These are the stress points. If the corrosion has eaten into these seams, the boat is not a solid vessel. It is a collection of 8 loose cans held together by rust. If they apply lift tension to a bad weld, the boat could snap in half. The report comes back to the surface. The news is impossible but true. The low oxygen environment of the silt has preserved the steel. The high tensile alloy is intact. The welds are holding. The valves are seized, but the pressure hull is not compromised. The boat is heavy filled with water and buried in the muck, but she is one piece. In June 1957, the job is executed by Bugsier, the Hamburg salvage company. They raise the hull, make her towable, and drag her to Havelswerk in Kiel for the rebuild. They do not have the infinite budget of a war machine. They have a business contract. They look at the numbers. 100 feet of water, 1,819 tons of dead weight, a suction force calculated in the hundreds of tons, and a hull that is flooded from bow to stern. They cannot safely pump her out at depth. One bad seal and the pressure differential turns a plug into a projectile and a bulkhead into a failure point. So they lift her flooded, steel, internal water, and the mud load together. The seabed does not want to let go. The mud has had 12 years to establish its grip. The engineers on the surface calculate the load paths. They will need more than just winches. They will need to apply a force that exceeds the grip of the earth. The survey is complete. The decision is made. They will not cut her up. They will rip her out of the sediment whole. The fjord is about to feel the weight shift. To move 1,819 tons of flooded steel from the seabed requires a machine larger than the target itself. Or it requires a manipulation of physics. The salvage team chooses the latter. They do not bring a floating crane with a massive boom. They bring air. The lifting method chosen for the U-2540 is the pontoon lift. It is a technique that turns the medium of the ocean against itself. The salvage team positions two massive lifting camels above the wreck site. These are large cylindrical steel tanks designed to be flooded or pumped dry. The engineering principle here is buoyancy control. It is the management of displacement to overcome gravity. The U-boat is currently heavier than the water it displaces because its internal spaces are flooded. It has lost its reserve buoyancy. The pontoons are designed to provide that missing buoyancy externally. By pumping compressed air into the camels, the engineers force the seawater out. This creates a void of air underwater. An air void underwater has only one instinct. It tries to climb. If the team can attach this rising force to the submarine, they can borrow the displacement needed to bring the hull to the surface. Divers descend to the mudline again. Their job is to thread 4-inch steel cables under the keel of the submarine. This is where the structural design of the Type 21 becomes a critical asset. The hull is constructed of 8 modular sections welded together at reinforced ring frames. These frames are the strongest points on the vessel. The divers position the wire slings directly beneath these ribs. This is a crucial decision. If they place the cables under the midsection of a module, the crushing force of the lift could buckle the steel plates like a wire cutting through cheese. By using the modular joints, they ensure the load follows the structural spine of the boat. The rigging is set, the cables are taut. On the surface, the salvage master gives the order to blow the tanks. High-capacity compressors roar to life. Air travels down the hoses and hisses into the pontoons. The water inside the tanks boils out. The buoyancy builds. At first, nothing happens. The pontoons sink slightly lower in the water as they take the strain. The cables vibrate with tension. Down below, the mud suction is still fighting. The sediment grips the hull with a stubborn vacuum. This is the most dangerous moment of the operation. The lifting force must build until it exceeds the weight of the submarine plus the breakout force of the mud. The danger is a sudden release. If the suction breaks instantly, the submarine could rocket toward the surface and collide with the lifting craft. The engineers watch the gauges. They manage the air pressure with surgical care. They want a slow separation, not a violent ejection. Then the seabed surrenders. A tremor runs up the lifting wires. The U-2540 breaks free from the clay. The suction vanishes. The hull is now swinging freely in the water column suspended by the pontoon cradle. The ascent begins with the boat still flooded. No pumping yet, not until the hull is controlled and the pressure differential stops being a weapon. They lift the steel and the water inside it as one dead weight. The group moves upward at a controlled pace. As they rise, the water pressure decreases and the air in the pontoons expands. The team must constantly vent air to keep the lift from accelerating out of control. It is a balancing act performed with valves and pressure gauges. Finally, the surface of the Flensburg Fjord breaks. Foam churns around the lifting craft. First, the steel camels breach the water rolling in the swell. Then between them, the dark gray shape of the conning tower rises. It is unlike any U-boat seen in the early war years. It is streamlined and enclosed. There are no railings. There are no deck guns to break the water. It looks like the fin of a shark. The hull follows. It is coated in black marine slime and barnacles. It drips the foul water of the bottom. But the structure is visible. The heavy pressure hull is intact. The lift has succeeded. The U-2540 is no longer a wreck. It is a floating vessel, again held up by the artificial lungs of the pontoons. The salvage team has won the battle against gravity. Now the Navy must decide if the prize was worth the risk. The boat is up, but it is a rusted shell. The real question is whether the metal inside is still steel or if it has become dust. The U-2540 is floating, but she is not yet a ship. She is a toxic hazard. As the pontoons release their burden, the vessel sits low in the water, listing heavily. She is towed to the dry dock at the Flensburg shipyard in Kiel. When the dock gates close and the pumps drain the basin, the true state of the Leviathan is revealed. The hull is a landscape of marine growth. The smell is overwhelming. Inside the compartments, the air is lethal, a mixture of rot and chemical fumes, trapped for 12 years. But the engineers are not interested in the smell. They are hunting for an invisible killer. In naval salvage, looking at the surface of the metal is not enough. They must look inside the grain of the steel. The enemy is a phenomenon known as corrosion fatigue. When steel is submerged in salt water, the chloride ions attack the iron. This creates rust, which is visible. But corrosion fatigue is different. It is the degradation of the metal's ability to handle stress. A submarine hull is a pressure vessel. It expands and contracts every time it dives. It is a breathing metal lung. If the corrosion has penetrated the microscopic boundaries between the steel crystals, the metal becomes brittle. It loses its elasticity. A hull suffering from corrosion fatigue might look solid, but under the crushing load of a deep dive, it would not bend. It would shatter like glass. The inspection team drills core samples from the pressure hull. They focus on the waterline and the bilge, where the acids from the decaying batteries would have pooled. They are testing the specific alloy used by the German war machine. It is designated Saint 52KM. This is a high-tensile carbon steel developed specifically to resist the extreme pressures of the Atlantic. The design of the type Flensburg plays a critical role in its survival. This boat was known by the nickname the Electro Boot. It was essentially a massive battery with a hull wrapped around it. To support the weight of the lead acid cells, the designers had to over-engineer the framing of the lower hull. The steel is thick. It was built to withstand the hydrodynamic forces of a submerged speed of 17.2 knots. This was unheard of in 1945 when most submarines struggled to reach 8 knots underwater. The engineers analyzed the samples. They are looking for pitting depth and wall thickness loss. The numbers come back from the lab. The results are a paradox. The outer skin is pitted and fouled. But the pressure hull, the vital inner cylinder that keeps the ocean out, is almost pristine. The numbers come back with a simple verdict. The pressure hull is still fit to be rebuilt. The outer skin is scarred, but the core cylinder holds. The mud of the Flensburg Fjord takes the credit. By sealing the boat in an anaerobic environment, the sediment starved the corrosion process of oxygen. The steel was pickled rather than eaten. The structural integrity is rated at nearly 100% of its original 1945 specification. This is the turning point. If the steel had been compromised, the U-2540 would be scrapped for razor blades. But the metal is sound. The hull is not a corpse. It is a dormant weapon waiting for a new heart. The West German Navy makes the decision. They will not just study this wreck, they will drive it. The cleaning crews move in with high-pressure hoses. The rot is blasted away. The ghost is about to be exorcised. The steel is ready, but the identity of the boat must change. The Kriegsmarine is dead. The vessel must be reborn for a new world. The hull of the U-2540 lies open in the dry dock. The steel has passed the test, but the identity of the vessel has failed. The West German Navy faces a binary choice. They can restore the boat to its wartime configuration as a museum piece, or they can strip it down and build something new inside the old shell. They choose the latter. The swastika and the designation U-2540 are erased. The objective is to transform a weapon of mass destruction into a laboratory. The shipyard engineers at Flensburg begin a process of radical surgery. They are aided by the foresight of the original 1944 design. The boat's modular sections, the same rings the divers checked on the seabed, now become an advantage in the yard. The hull can be treated as a sequence of hardpoints. Systems can be stripped and rebuilt, module by module, without endangering the pressure cylinder. They can gut the interior systems without destroying the structural integrity of the pressure hull. They rip out the flak cannons from the deck. They remove the obsolete targeting computers. The bridge structure, which originally featured open anti-aircraft positions, is completely redesigned. It is enclosed and streamlined to reduce noise and resistance. The engineers are particularly interested in the propulsion system. This is where the boat was decades ahead of its time. The Type 21 was equipped with a secondary electric drive system known as the creeping motors. These were small, silent electric motors that utilized V-belts to drive the propeller shafts. The critical innovation was the mounting. The motors were not bolted directly to the hull, they were suspended on rubber foundations. This is a vibration isolation strategy. In underwater warfare, noise is death. When a motor spins, it creates vibration. If that motor is bolted to the steel hull, the hull acts like a speaker cone, broadcasting the hum into the ocean. By isolating the motors on rubber, the German engineers broke the sound path. The hull remained silent. The refit team refurbishes this system. They know that the future of submarine warfare is not about surface speed, but about stealth. The boat is rewired and replumbed. The torpedo tubes are kept, but their purpose changes. They will no longer fire war shots in anger. They will be used to test the new generation of wire-guided torpedoes and sensor packages. The transformation is total. The vessel that emerges from the dock looks different. It is smoother, it is unarmed, and it has a new name. It is christened the Wilhelm Bauer. This is a deliberate choice. Wilhelm Bauer was the 19th century pioneer who built the first German submarine. By taking his name, the boat connects itself to the history of engineering rather than the history of the Third Reich. On September 1st, 1960, the boat is commissioned into the Bundesmarine. The paradox is complete. The ship that was scuttled to prevent the Allies from stealing its secrets is now a flagship of the NATO alliance. The salvage operation that began with a diver in the mud has ended with a fully operational research vessel. The U-boat is dead, the Wilhelm Bauer is alive. She is ready to return to the deep, not to hunt convoys, but to hunt data. The Wilhelm Bauer serves in two lives. Commissioned on September 1st, 1960, decommissioned in August 1968, then returned to service in May 1970, and finally out of use in March 1982. A research hull with a pause in its heartbeat, her mission was to validate the physics of the future. The primary contribution of the Wilhelm Bauer was the study of underwater efficiency. The engineers used her to master the concept of hydrodynamic drag. Drag is the resistance force that water exerts on a moving object. Water is 800 times denser than air. Moving through it requires immense energy. Earlier hulls carried surface ship habits into the sea. Every railing, flat deck edge, and gun platform became drag, turbulence, and acoustic signature. The Wilhelm Bauer was different. She was a drop of water made of steel. Her designers had ruthlessly eliminated every protruding element that generated form drag. They removed the deck guns, they retracted the bollards, they streamlined the tower. This geometry allowed the water to flow over the hull in a laminar sheet, rather than churning into chaotic eddies. By testing this hull, the modern Navy learned how to build the Type 206 class submarines, which would guard the Baltic for the next 40 years. The grandfather taught the grandson how to swim, but even a research ship is not safe from the hazards of the sea. In 1980, the Wilhelm Bauer was involved in a collision that serves as a strange footnote in naval history. During a surface maneuver, she collided with the destroyer Z-3. The irony of the incident was hidden in the registry logs. The Z-3 was formerly the USS Wadsworth, a definitive American destroyer from the Pacific Theater. 35 years after the war ended, a Nazi U-boat and an American destroyer finally smashed into each other, not in combat, but in a NATO training accident. Both ships survived, but it was a reminder that these machines were designed for violence. By 1982, the technology had finally outpaced the hull. The Wilhelm Bauer was decommissioned. The Navy stripped her sensitive equipment and prepared to dispose of the shell. Usually, this is the end of the story. The cutting torches arrive and the steel is recycled. But the U-2540 had cheated death twice already. She was not going to the scrapyard. A coalition of veterans and historians recognized the unique status of the boat. She was the last of her kind. Of the Type Weimi boats officially commissioned, she is the last surviving complete specimen. Today, the only floating example on display. The others had been bombed, scuttled, or scrapped by the Allies. She was the only surviving specimen of the technology that changed submarine warfare forever. She was purchased and towed to Bremerhaven. The refit for her final role was less invasive than the salvage. They restored her outer appearance to the wartime configuration. They put the fake gun barrels back on the deck to replicate the silhouette of 1945. But inside, she remains a hybrid. If you walk through her compartments today, you see the layers of history. You see the original German valves from the war. You see the NATO electronics from the Cold War. You see the scars of the Salvage and the patches on the steel. The U-2540 is now a museum ship. She sits in the harbor dock floating quietly. She is a destination for tourists and engineers. She is no longer a weapon or a research platform. She is a witness. She is proof that in the world of naval salvage, the line between a wreck and a ship is merely a decision. The ocean tried to claim her. The mud tried to keep her. But the physics of buoyancy and the will of the engineers brought her back. She is the boat that refused to die.